There's a new family member making their way to Texas Chainsaw, and of course with new characters come new perks. Today we'll be covering all 9 leaked perks, the majority of which pertain to TCM's newest family member and her ability. There's even a new victim perk that we were able to dig up, and we'll be discussing that at the end of today's video. Let me know in the comments which perk you're most excited for, and let me know if you think of any interesting synergies with these new perks. I'll be posting all of the leaked perks in our community Discord, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. Just a heads up, there are of course going to be spoilers in today's video, and additionally, if you're new here, consider subscribing to stay up to date with all of our TCM news and guides. I also stream over on Twitch regularly, so come say hello over there. But let's jump right in. So first off, I'm going to briefly go over who the new TCM family member is and their abilities so that we can gain a better understanding on the new perks coming to the game. But if you already know this information, feel free to use the timestamps below to jump to the perk section of the video. The new family member coming to TCM is named Black Nancy. Nancy has 2 main abilities in her kit. The first ability is called Spy, and this allows Nancy to get a quick glimpse into the victim's POV in hopes of finding where they're located. It's very hard to discern where victims are located, but it could be useful in some situations. It seems that using the Spy ability also briefly stuns Nancy after using it. We aren't sure if the Spy ability will alert victims that their position has been compromised, but I'll be interested to see what happens once Nancy makes her way to live servers. The second ability in Nancy's kit is Barbed Wire. With this ability, she is able to trap select locations and catch victims in her traps. It appears that the barbed wire will stick to victims, causing them to make noise with any movement. The barbed wire will most likely inflict damage upon victims and possibly cause a movement debuff as well. Nancy can also interact with sissy tables, but we aren't sure if this is related to her barbed wire or spy ability. Besides that, we don't know much more about Black Nancy's kit, so let's hop into some of the leaked perk information. We were able to dig up some of the information pertaining to the perks that Nancy may be bringing with her. One huge disclaimer I need to make is that with any leaked information, we must always take it with a grain of salt. There's a possibility that these perks may have different names, descriptions, values, or flat out not make their way into TCM. And this is always the risk that comes with leaks. But nonetheless, this is some pretty exciting information, so let's knock them out. The first perk we have on the list today is called Give Me More. This increases Nancy's ability regeneration by 15%, but her stamina regeneration will be reduced by 15%. I think that this is a pretty interesting perk and could be worth running depending on how dependable Nancy's ability is. Information is king in TCM, so I think this perk's utility really comes down to how effective her ability turns out to be. After that, we've got the perk Ding Dong. This perk causes the bell on her barbed wire to ring out 100% louder and increases the highlight range by 50%. I think that this perk could be useful in terms of making all family members aware of victims who have been snared in the barbed wire and definitely instill some panic into victims. I could see this perk having less value if the base ability is loud enough or if the highlight range ends up being somewhat decent in the base kit. Next up on the list is Hurt 'em. This perk causes barbed wire traps to do 50% more damage. I'm so curious to see how useful this perk ends up being, as we don't have any information as to how much damage these traps will inflict on victims. I could see this perk being a nice buff to Nancy's ability, and it could help the family with quick executions after a victim has been snared. Right after that, we've got the perk I'll Kill Them All. After using her ability, Nancy's damage is increased by 15%, for 30 seconds. I could absolutely see this being one of Nancy's best perks, especially among experienced players. Gaining information on victims' whereabouts and then receiving a damage buff right after could be incredibly powerful for her kit. Next up, we've got Not That Easy. When a victim is caught in your barbed wire, it is 60% harder for them to remove the wire. Depending on how difficult it is to remove the wire base kit, I could actually see this perk being pretty overwhelming for some victims, and it could end up being pretty effective. After that, we've got the perk Pins and Needles. Placing a barbed wire spool has a 60% chance not to consume an inventory item. I could see this being a nice perk for players who don't want to craft lots of wire throughout the match, or for players who are placing a ton of traps. We don't know if there will be a maximum amount of traps that Nancy is allowed to have out at a time, and this could impact that perk as well. Right after that, we've got Strong Minded. After using her ability, Nancy's stamina depletion is reduced by 30%, for 30 seconds. I can see this perk being somewhat useful if Nancy is having to travel far distances to use the information she has just gained, but I think the other unique perk, I'll Kill Them All, may be more favorable for some players. This perk could also be pretty useful if Nancy has low stamina in her attributes. Next up is the perk Wait a Second. This perk makes it so that victims cannot remove the barbed wire themselves for 20 seconds, but it can still be removed instantly with the help of another victim. I can see this perk being insanely useful for gathering information on a victim's location after being caught in some wire. The fact that moving with the wire produces lots of noise makes this a pretty brutal perk in a lot of ways. Our final perk for today isn't a unique Nancy perk, but actually a victim perk that could be coming in the next update. This perk is called Out of My Head. This perk will allow victims to reduce Nancy's ability time by increasing the depletion rate of her ability by 80%, and this also reduces the time that poison affects you by 3 seconds. Depending on how quickly Nancy's ability depletes, this could be an interesting choice for a perk, and the fact that it counters 2 specific family members as well is pretty interesting to me. I'm definitely curious to see how this one shakes out. Those are all the leaks that we've got to cover for today, but if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like or subscribe for more TCM content. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, but until next time, take it easy.